This latest American movie quickly topped the 2023 thriller Dark Horse list upon its release, igniting a trail of popularity from abroad all the way to the domestic market. Especially, this ghost, speeding at 180 miles per hour, can slip through the screen into anyone's bed. So now, please hurry to lock the doors and windows and invite your friends to watch together. In the middle of the night, Peter was sleeping alone when a strange noise woke him, frightening him to jump up. The voice came from the wall. Opposite the wall is the parents' room. Peter quickly pressed his ear against the wall and then knocked on it, only to receive a response from inside the wall. Peter rushed to his parents' room, but they were already asleep, and it wasn't his parents who answered him. Frightened, Peter shook his parents awake.
Peter?
I heard something. What did you hear?
His mother, Carol, immediately got up to listen and even knocked hard on the wall, but heard nothing. His father, Mark, thought maybe a mouse had gotten into the wall, so the next morning, he sprinkled cinnamon-flavored rat poison at Peter's doorway. But that night, the sound came from the wall again, and more terrifyingly, the wall began to speak.
Just want to talk.
Peter had been quite scared, but the other person's voice sounded like a gentle sister, and Peter immediately relaxed. Being timid and friendless at school, Peter really needed someone to talk to, so he chatted with the wall all night long. The next day, Peter felt great and even drew the best monster pumpkin in class, earning praise from his teacher, Devine. This irked Brian, who, after class, pushed Peter down and stomped on his pumpkin. Peter, too scared to tell his parents, hid under the covers and cried alone. Hearing Peter's muffled sobs, the wall spoke again. It encouraged him to fight back against his bullies. If they push, he should push back. This emboldened Peter, and the next day at school, he pushed Brian down the stairs, but uncontrollably, Brian broke his leg. Such a bad act of violence made Mark furious. He shouted at Peter, who looked at his dad with an innocent look on his face.
You're grounded. He's going in the basement.
The mention of the basement filled Peter with dread. Mark pushes open the fridge in the kitchen and reveals a small door which is the entrance to the basement. Carol takes out the key and walks in with ease. Despite his resistance, Peter was forced down by Mark. Carol hesitated, leading Peter with just a few words before both parents turned and left.
Because we love you.
Mark even kindly turned off the light, leaving little Peter alone in the dark. Frightened, Peter softly wept, resenting the parents who claimed to love him yet abandoned him. Just then Peter realized that there was a large chain at his feet attached to an iron fence, and underneath the fence was a cellar. Curious but frightened, Peter peered down to see a person curled up in the cellar, scaring him from looking further. After a day and night, Peter was finally let out. Seeing his son, scared and listless, Mark asked,
About what?
Peter's reply was somewhat insincere. A day and night in the dark and countless oppressive days made Peter feel as if his parents were like two persistent shadows looming over him. Once they left, Peter quickly jumped off the bed and knocked on the wall. Soon, a voice came from within.
Peter, I was worried about you. You have to be careful with them. They are not what they seem.
This warning resonated with Peter, who, in a moment of empathy, tore at the wallpaper, wanting to meet this confidant. To Peter's shock, behind the wallpaper, he discovered a hole, and within it, astonishingly, there was an eye.
Are you? I'm your sister. Mom and Dad. They're evil, Peter. Now you know. Your time is coming.
His sister's words filled him with fear, and he immediately jumped back on the bed, covering his head with the blanket. But then, Peter sat up quickly to ask who was outside, but no one answered. Then the doorknob turned, and the door opened, yet no one was there. However, the next second,
Peter. Look what you've done to your mother, Peter.
Peter dared not tell his mother that he had seen Sarah, the imprisoned girl, hiding in the wall the night before. Sarah had told Peter that their parents were murderous maniacs and would kill him once they were done experiencing parenthood. Peter couldn't believe it, but Sarah said they had already killed a child and buried it in the garden. In disbelief, Peter went to the garden the next day and frantically dug until he unearthed a skull. Just as he was about to examine it closely, Carol suddenly came out. Nervously, but cleverly, Peter immediately picked up a pumpkin, claiming he just wanted to choose one for a Halloween lantern. The excuse seemed solid, and Carol, after giving Peter a long, hard look, eventually turned and left. But then, Carol took a lot of pumpkins to the kitchen and started scooping out the seeds with a knife. As she dug, Carol's face turned ferocious, scaring Peter into shrinking into a corner, too afraid to face his mother alone. Recalling that his report card had Devine's phone number, Peter sneaked into his parents' room, intending to call Devine for help. But just as he started speaking, Carol walked in. But then Carol spotted the torn wallpaper, and as soon as she pulled Peter away from her, she looked into it. Upon seeing the small hole, Carol's legs went weak instantly. She immediately began feeling around the wall in the direction of the hole, suggesting that her imprisoned daughter had already learned to make holes inside the wall. Suddenly, the sound of a clock striking made Carol extremely frightened, and she walked out of the room with a look of despair, as if she had given up on Peter. That night, Peter woke up to hear his parents whispering, so he hid and eavesdropped. He heard them planning to get rid of him and replace him with a more obedient child, which made Peter gasp in horror. Carol's sharp gaze immediately shot over, frightening Peter into running back to his room and pretending to sleep. But soon, Mark came in.
When I get home tomorrow, you'll help me out in the garden.
Mentioning the garden made Peter think of the human skull. And the next day, Mark dug a hole in the garden. Peter estimated the hole was about his height and watched Mark in disbelief. But Mark appeared indifferent. Mark's cold gaze frightened Peter, but he still picked up the shovel and finished digging the grave, though who would ultimately lie in it remained to be seen. That night, Carol cooked 3 pots of black rice porridge. Peter stirred his spoon around but didn't bring it to his mouth. Mark, however, ate with relish. Mentioning cinnamon, Mark's expression changed instantly. A few days earlier, when they were spreading rat poison, he had specifically told Peter to use cinnamon-flavored poison because its tasty smell makes it hard for rats to distinguish between poison and food. Seeing Peter's untouched porridge, Mark was sure Peter had poisoned him.
What did you do?
You hurt my sister.
Mark Carroll never told Peter he had a sister because the daughter was long locked away in the walls. However, the next second, Mark was poisoned, continuously vomiting black blood, seemingly with his internal organs failing. Carol, petrified, tried to call the police only to find the phone line had been cut. She couldn't believe such cruelty and meticulousness could be the work of her 8-year-old son. She immediately grabbed a knife and charged at Peter. Just as Peter was about to be caught, Carol started violently vomiting. She too had eaten a lot of the porridge and was now poisoned, but Carol still struggled to stab Peter. Peter, panicked, had no choice but to push Carol down the stairs, where her knife plunged into her chest. Peter, seeing Carol motionless, went to get the keys to release Sarah. He moved the large clock in Carol's bedroom, revealing a small door. Sarah was locked behind it. In the walls, Peter hurriedly unlocked the door, but a creepy laugh came from inside. Peter ran back to his room in terror, pressing against the door, but Sarah was already chasing him. As Peter trembled, a group of children wearing Halloween masks came to their house for candy. The leader was Brian, who bullied Peter. As soon as the 4 of them reached the door, it opened silently, as if inviting them in. The 4 of them wasted no time in going in and doing all sorts of damage. After a while, they noticed someone in the house. One approached, and tragedy struck. Sarah took out the rest of them. Peter realized he had underestimated his sister. Sarah wasn't a pitiable little girl but a monster filled with violence and blood. Any familial love Peter had was scared away. After killing these people, Sarah climbed the walls to Peter's rooftop, hanging her hair down to converse with him. She then locked Peter in the basement, where he experienced unspeakable suffering. Devine, who received a call from Peter, felt something was off and decided to visit. Upon entering, she was met with a scene of devastation and quickly tried to call the police. But at that moment, Devine struggled forward. She had never seen such humanoid crawling monsters, but as Devine reached the door, she found it locked. Devine shouted Peter's name in fear, and Peter, who was locked in the basement, immediately shouted for Devine to run. But how could Devine abandon a child? She followed his voice to find Peter, only to see his hand poking out from a small hole in his bedroom. Devine was dumbfounded by the horror of Sarah, but soon, she heard noises from the walls. Realizing they were hollow, Devine hurriedly smashed at the wall. In a short while she smashed a hole and pulled Peter out. They hurriedly ran towards the back door, but as Devine leaped out, Peter was dragged back in. Peter was locked in a cellar, just 1 meter wide but 10 meters deep. This dark 10 square meters was all the love his parents had for Sarah. Sarah, confined for years, had learned to crawl on the walls like a spider. Seeing Sarah descend, Peter was petrified. Hearing Devine, Sarah covered Peter's mouth to prevent him from calling for help. Devine, approaching the cellar with a pickaxe, was cautious, but then, Sarah leaped out, injuring Devine's leg. With no time to run, Devine moved against the wall to avoid being attacked from behind, but Sarah crawled in front of her. Seeing the grotesque girl, Devine was paralyzed with fear. Understanding the look, Sarah raised her claws to gouge out Devine's eyes, but at that moment, Peter had grabbed Sarah's hair. Saving Devine, he restrained Sarah while climbing out of the cellar. Seeing Sarah about to rise, Peter signaled Devine to act. Devine grabbed the pickaxe, striking Sarah's stomach. Sarah, in agony, rolled down the cellar but climbed up in 3 seconds. Peter quickly pulled down a chain, locking the iron bars and the switch. Sarah extended her pitiful hand, begging. Despite Peter's denial, every night he lay in bed, he wondered if he had locked the door properly. He would see his mother's figure pass by, hear his father's roars, and even spot a strand of Sarah's hair on the bed. Though those who scared him were all gone, Peter was left with an inescapable shadow. That's the story for today. See you next time.